The girl left her friend's house on her bicycle and disappeared without a trace. A few hours later, dozens of people came out looking for her, and the police got involved. Despite the fact that the detectives had a perfectly clear version of what happened from the very first days, this case stretched out for years until an unforeseen ending shocked everyone. Friends, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It's very important for me. Parrick was born on September 2, 1996 in the small American village of Constantine, Michigan. She was cheerful and active and enjoyed sports and outdoor activities with her friends. She also often went fishing with her older brother. On November 8, 2007, when Jody was 11, she left school and came home. Soon after, the girl decided to visit her friend, who lived only a few minutes from her home. Jody took her bike and waited for her brother to see her off, which is what their mother always insisted on. The woman was afraid to leave her daughter alone, despite the fact that their village was a relatively quiet place. The brother walked with her and later had to escort the girl back home. But when he came to her friend's house again, her parents said that Jody had already left. The boy did not pay much attention to this because she had to drive only a few hundred meters. But the girl was not at home. Her mother was worried. It was already evening, and Jody should have been back a long time ago. She'd never been anywhere without permission, so the woman was very hesitant that Jody would just hang out. The mother went to her friend's house and told her that Jody never came back. The girl's parents immediately called her uncle, a reserve police officer named Ray McCann. He came to them and offered his help in the search. Jody's mother, along with other family members and acquaintances, drove their cars and began searching the village. The area of this settlement was less than 5 square kilometers. They drove along the school, playgrounds, parks, and other places that the girl might have gone. Her mother also drove home. Her mother also drove home to all of her friends, but none of them saw Jody after school. When it was dark outside, the women decided to go to the police, and the officers immediately joined the search. The mother occasionally came across other people who were driving around the village looking for her daughter, and at some point she crossed paths with Ray, the police reserve. They talked about places they'd already looked, and then Ray asked if anyone had looked in the local cemetery. The woman considered this question very strange. Why did the man think about such a particular place? Besides, Jody obviously wouldn't have gone there of her own free will and could only have been there if something had happened to her. The detectives started investigating, and the first thing they did was talk to Jody's mum. During these interviews, it appeared to the investigators that the woman was withholding information from them. They didn't say exactly what made them think that, but soon the mother did. The police admit she had something to do with her daughter's death. After finding no corroboration, investigators turned their attention to Jody's older brother, a boy who was 13 years old and almost directly charged with murder. The police suggested that he and his friends could have done something to the girl. However, this version was not confirmed. When the information about the interrogation of the mother and brother of the victim came to the media, the police stated that they were merely based on statistics. Most often behind the killing are relatives and close people, so they had to work this line. At the same time, Ray, for some reason, was in no hurry to check his own guess, looking elsewhere. As a result, the woman and other people decided to go to the cemetery, and already at the entrance to him, she noticed something alarming. Jody's bicycle lay at the entrance, and a few tens of meters away, the mother discovered her daughter's body. It wasn't until the girl's body was handed over to the medical examiners that the cause of death was strangulation, that there were no visible wounds. From the marks on her wrists, the experts concluded that the girl had been wearing handcuffs or plastic ties for some time. She was also assaulted, but the experts did not find any traces of semen from which a DNA sample could be extracted. However, they noticed a small speck of blood on Jody's clothes, and a more detailed examination also found traces of saliva. After analyzing both of these samples, the experts pulled a DNA sample from an unknown male who was not in the FBI database. Eventually, they stopped considering their involvement and turned to another suspect. During the investigation, they learned that Ray McCann had asked 4 times in the evening if anyone was looking for a girl in the local cemetery, but he never went there. Given that her body was found in this particular location, this behavior seemed suspicious. Investigators questioned him, but the man denied any involvement in the murder. According to Ray, he spent the morning of November 8 at home playing video games. When his 2 sons returned from school, he went with them to the local store where he bought them the toy pistols the children had asked him to. After that, they went home. At about 5:00 p.m., Ray's wife came home from work. The family had dinner, and at about 8:00 p.m., the man was told that Jody was missing. He went searching in his car alone. After touring half the village, he met other people who were also looking for the girl and asked if anyone had inspected the local cemetery. At the interrogation, Ray was asked why he had pointed to the place. The man stated that he was guided by his police experience in banal logic. Dozens of people searched for the girl for hours in a small village, and no one thought to search the cemetery. When asked why he did not go there himself, Ray replied that he was looking at other places, and eventually he did get there. By that time, a lot of people were there, and the girl's mother found her body. The police had no evidence to link Ray to the murder, so they continued to investigate for months. Investigators conducted several hundred interrogations and took DNA samples from 300 villagers, including Ray. But all this brought no results. Since then, the case has dragged on for years as detectives have been unable to find new evidence. But the cops never stopped thinking that Ray was behind the murder, and eventually they focused on proving his guilt. In the years following Jody's death, he was interrogated more than 20 times. The man had never used a lawyer and had taken a polygraph test twice. Despite this, the sheriff's office became increasingly convinced that the killer was sitting right in front of them. In the summer of 2011, detectives decided to change tactics and increased pressure on Ray. Hoping to get a confession, he was called back for questioning and told that they had irrefutable evidence that suggested that he had left the girl's body in that cemetery. The investigators also stated that the prosecutor's office had already considered the case and were prepared to bring it to trial. In conversations with him, the police assumed that he might have accidentally stumbled upon the girl's body or inadvertently killed her. They tried to get him to confess anything, but Ray kept insisting he was innocent. In subsequent interviews, the detective stated that the victim's DNA was found on his clothes and inside his car. Ray kept insisting that he hadn't touched Judy and suggested that the DNA might have gotten there after he pulled her mum away from her body that night. However, the investigators stated that the woman had refuted the allegations. In addition, the police said that they had surveillance footage from the village, which contradicts his alibi. Ray said that he was sitting at home playing video game that day. However, the police said that they spotted him in the street on one of the recordings. Ray kept insisting that he was telling the truth. Back then, the detectives used another bargaining chip. After examining his computer, they discovered that on the day of the murder, a man was visiting erotic websites. In their opinion, this further indicated his involvement in the murder. They also insisted that Ray had 2 sets of handcuffs. Some of the men ratted them out early in the investigation, but forensics didn't find any trace of Jody's DNA. Ray insisted that he never had a second set, but the cops didn't believe him. However, their interrogations were inconclusive and they had to release the man. By then, everyone in the village already knew he was a suspect and believed that Ray was getting away with murder. The detectives also repeatedly spoke to his relatives, including his 2 sons and his daughter, 4 years after the murder. They asked them if the boys had gone to the store with their father to buy toy pistols, and they could not remember. In addition, the police have repeatedly told Ray's wife that there is enough evidence against him to put him away for murder anyway. For example, they said that sand was found on the victim's shoes from the back of their house. As a result, a woman divorced him, taking the children. Ray continued to live in freedom, but everyone was 100% certain that he was the one who killed Jody. But there was one important nuance in the whole story. The evidence that the police had been talking about for years was not really there. They deliberately lied about Jody's DNA being found on his clothes and other things in an attempt to get a confession. They had no DNA, no camera footage, sand on the victim's boots from his backyard and everything. The only thing they had was a man offering to check out a cemetery, and most importantly, investigators had every right to lie about having evidence to try and get a suspect to talk. But none of this helped them get a confession, and in 2014, they decided to arrest Ray. However, they could not charge him with murder, so the man was charged with 5 counts of perjury. These episodes were based on the fact that Ray sometimes gave contradictory information during various interrogations over the years. For example, some of the participants in the case could not recall the negotiations with Ray that day, which the man himself described during the interrogation. He was also accused of lying because he denied the presence of the second handcuffs, although no evidence to the contrary was available to the police. The man hired a lawyer who called the charges against Ray completely baseless and ridiculous. He pointed out that the police officers were clinging to inaccuracies in his testimony several years after the incident, but the judge sided with the investigators, and Ray was convicted of perjury, receiving 20 months to 20 years in prison. All the villagers, including Jody's relatives, were happy to see a dangerous criminal behind bars. Although Ray was still not charged with the murder, he was able to be isolated from society and give the police more time to finally find the missing evidence. This continued until 2015, when something unexpected happened on July 28 in a nearby town called White Pigeon, just 5 minutes from the village. A 10-year-old girl was riding her bike down the street. At some point, a man came out of his garage and asked the girl to help him move the boxes. She knew the man, so she got off her bike and went to his garage. As soon as the girl was there, the man pulled out a knife, grabbed her, and tried to tie her with plastic ties, but she managed to escape and escaped. The girl was frightened and ran home, where she told her mother about what had happened. Moreover, she recognized this man. Daniel Parlang was one of them. The woman immediately reported it to the police. Like all other residents, she remembered Jody's murder perfectly, and at the time, people were not yet convinced that Ray was the culprit. But the police said that Daniel was a well-respected man, so she shouldn't worry. The investigators spoke to him, and the man stated that he had not been following anyone. That was the end of the story. However, the woman continued to consider Daniel suspicious and even dangerous. Since then, she hasn't even let her daughter go alone into their own backyard. Let's go back to 2015. After Daniel was arrested, they took a DNA sample from him and loaded it into the database. To the surprise of the detectives, they immediately got a match to an old case, the murder of Jody Parrak. His saliva and blood were found on her clothes. It was further revealed that at the time of Jody's murder, he lived only a few streets away from where she had disappeared. The police only spoke to him once and did not even ask for a DNA sample, as Daniel did not seem suspicious. Then she immediately told about the incident. The police quickly joined the case and the attacker was arrested. It was 65-year-old Daniel Parlang, who had previously worked as a sports coach for children. After searching his house, the detectives found a list with the names of several local girls. Given that he had just attempted to abduct the girl, the police immediately assumed that the list contained the names of other potential victims. After examining his background, investigators discovered something else. He used to live in the same village as Jody, but he's never had a criminal record. However, a very strange episode occurred on November 18, 2009, 2 years after Jody's murder. A 12-year-old girl was walking home from school, passing a house. She noticed a man peering around the corner and staring at her. A few years after the murder, he moved from the village to a nearby town. There the man lived with his wife, children and grandchildren, having an excellent reputation among neighbors. After his arrest, the detectives found another possible victim for Daniel. In 1997, a 6-year-old girl went cycling near her home and disappeared without a trace. By a very terrible coincidence, at that time, a man lived nearby. Several witnesses caught a glimpse of a suspicious man driving around the area, and based on their testimony made a portrait of the suspect. The man in the picture looked a lot like Daniel. In that case, The police failed to find any evidence to link him to the case, and the man was not even considered a suspect. On September 10, 2015, he was charged with Jodi's murder. At first, he denied involvement, but then investigators offered him a deal. They promised to drop the charges for the recent attempted abduction of the girl, as well as grant immunity for all other crimes he may have committed in the district. In this case, the man could have received a slightly shorter prison sentence rather than a life sentence. In return, Daniel would confess to Jodi's murder and reveal all the details of his actions. The man asked for time to talk to his family, and an hour later, he accepted the offer. Daniel said he was cleaning his garage that day. After noticing a girl passing by on her bicycle, he approached and asked for help moving boxes. When the girl entered the garage, he attacked her, tied her up with plastic ties, and abused her. He then killed her and took the body with the bike to the cemetery. As a result of this deal, Daniel received 30 to 60 years in prison. Given his age, he had little chance of getting out of prison after sentencing. He made a final statement saying that he was ashamed of what he had done and sincerely repented. A few weeks after that, an ex-sheriff came to visit Ray in prison. The man thought the policeman was going to apologize to him for the false accusations. However, the sheriff managed to surprise him. He stated that he still considered Ray an accomplice in the case and accused him of helping Daniel to commit the crime. At the same time, Daniel himself said in interrogations that he never knew Ray. The sheriff later gave an interview to a local TV station and said he had absolutely no regrets about Ray. He explained that he had arrested him, not for murder, but for perjury, so his conscience was clear. Ray remained in prison until December 2015, when it was time to apply for parole. When he was released, the man moved to another town and only occasionally came to visit his father's grave. A year later, Ray became interested in a documentary studio. They put out a request for all the evidence in this case and found out something interesting. During Ray's trial, the sheriff claimed that he had video footage from a security camera that proves that Ray lied about his location in the wind, looking for Jodi. The sheriff was referring to security footage from a local factory. During interrogations, Ray said that he had come to the cemetery along a particular path, but the sheriff said that the camera footage denied these words. In fact, it turned out that this camera did not capture the trail at all and was directed in a different direction. This fact caused a wave of indignation in the media. It is not clear how the court mistook the words of the sheriff for the truth and did not check the real record, but the fact remained. This episode was one of 5 that put Ray in prison, and the sheriff, who happened to be the one who lied under oath, didn't get any punishment and retired honorably. Due to widespread public outcry, the court reviewed the charges against Ray, and in December 2017, they were completely dropped. 2 years later, the man received a $40,000 payment. Given that Ray had lost his entire family, spent almost 2 years in prison, and suffered several attempts on his life there, this was not an outcome he was comfortable with. He wanted the sheriff and the other parties responsible for his broken life to be held accountable. Therefore, in late 2019, he filed a lawsuit against them, resulting in an additional payment of $88,000. However, the authorities appealed and the decision was reversed. Ray is still trying to get justice, but due to the bureaucracy involved, the process is still stalled. Remarkably, even Jodi's mum still thinks he's somehow involved in her daughter's murder. Despite the confession of the real culprit, the result is likely to be years of lies by investigators focused on one suspect. Their behavior led the real killer to spend years on the outside and almost kill another girl. If she hadn't managed somehow to escape this garage, she would have shared Jodi's fate. That's what Daniel said after he signed the deal when he was asked what he was going to do with that girl. But the police were not responsible for this, nor for the destruction of Ray's fate. Share your opinion on this story in the comments and be sure to like it under this clip if you like it. I also recommend subscribing to my channel where I publish the most interesting criminal news from around the world. Thank you for watching